Hello, and welcome to this professional development video about writing measurable and benchmarked IEP goals. My name is Brent Elder, and I'm an assistant professor in the Interdisciplinary and Inclusive Education Department at Rowan University. So, what is benchmarking? Benchmarking is breaking an IEP goal into an annual goal, typically aligned with the annual IEP, with benchmarks 1, 2, and 3 aligned with the subsequent marking periods. So if you have an annual goal at the end of the school year, benchmark 1 would be the first benchmark or marking period, benchmark 2 would be the second marking period, benchmark 3 would be the third marking period, and the annual goal would be the fourth. Why would a special education teacher benchmark IEP goals? It increases accountability. It takes a larger skill or concept and breaks it down into smaller chunks. So it keeps the student moving around. Either we're always assessing to see if we need to increase the skill or decrease the skill or increase the prompt level or decrease the prompt level. We'll explain more of this as we go. So it avoids stagnation. It increases clarity. So anybody that's working on a goal, including paraprofessionals or a parent reading a goal, will understand just how the goal is broken down from the annual goal and how every step of the way we will increase expectations for student learning. And so it provides a clarity of scope and sequence of what will be taught and when. So here's an example. We'll unpack this a bit more. The annual goal during IEP season. So by May 2021, you'd have a larger goal broken down into benchmarks and marking periods of the school year. So typically, by November 2020, there would be the first benchmark. By January 2021, second benchmark. By March 2021, third benchmark, and the annual goal at the end. And what we're going to talk about next is ways that we can vary the benchmarks. So we can vary benchmarks by prompting level, level of independence, by skill level. And by skill level, in my mind, I think about Bloom's taxonomy, and I'll unpack that in a minute. Or by criteria, 4 out of 10 is 40%, 6 out of 10, 60%, 8 out of 10, 80%. So that just helps me if I make something out of 10. You can choose whatever numbers work for you. In my mind, that helps me with percentages and understanding mastery. So I mentioned Bloom's taxonomy in a previous slide. You might have an annual goal be to analyze, to have students distinguish between different parts of something. Your benchmark 1 might be for students to remember something about that concept. Can the student recall or remember the information? Then the next benchmark might be something about understanding. Can the student explain ideas or concepts? The third benchmark might be something about applying. Can the students use information in a new way? And then leading up to the annual benchmark with analyzing. And there's different words that you can use to describe student learning in the far right-hand side of this slide. For remembering, define, duplicate, list, memorize, recall, and so on as you go through Bloom's taxonomy. So one approach to writing benchmarked and measurable IEP goals is the ABCDE approach, where A is the audience, make sure that it's clear about who this goal is about. That we have an observable behavior, that we have a clear condition, that there's a degree or criteria, a percentage, and an expected date, so it's time bound. Here's an example of an ABCDE approach. By November 2020, when given a second grade text in his general education classroom, Franklin will be able to retell the story or explain the main idea with one verbal prompt from a teacher or peer on 8 out of 10 opportunities as measured by a teacher-created data sheet. So for the A, the audience, it's Franklin. The behavior or observable act, Franklin will be able to retell the story or explain the main idea with one verbal prompt. So you can visualize that in your mind. The condition is when he's given a second grade text in a general education classroom. Again, you can visualize that. The degree or criteria, 8 out of 10 opportunities, 80%. That could vary with each benchmark. And the expected date by November 2020. So there's always a timeline, and you're always reassessing as you go through that timeline with each benchmark. Another approach that is often taught in teacher education programs is SMART goals, with S being specific. And it's similar to the ABCDE approach, but it's supposed to be very clear, right? So the goal is supposed to be very specific. And bolded in this slide is the who, what, when, where, how. Okay, so it's the same IEP goal as before. And when given a second grade text in his general education classroom, Franklin will be able to retell the story or explain with one verbal prompt. So it's just broken down in different ways so that's specific, so that someone else can understand the goal and that you've addressed who, what, when, where, and how. The M of SMART goals is that the goal must be measurable. And in this case, it's can you measure something in quantitative numbers or qualitative observable assessments? And in this case, we have one verbal prompt on 8 out of 10 opportunities. And like I said, that's like 80%. And it's created and it's measured by a teacher created data sheet. So along with providing the student with materials, the teacher is also creating something to document student progress. The A of SMART goals is attainable. So we want to make sure that the goal is something that you can expect in a reasonable amount of time. The annual goal may be far off, and so you have to break that down. And so starting with the first marking period, and you would have an easier version, an easier to attain version of that goal. I always think about writing an annual goal, within a year, and breaking down the benchmarks that align with marking periods, because you are naturally assessing at that time and reporting to the parents or family anyways. The R of SMART goals is that the goal must be relevant. And the goal should be relevant to the student's educational needs and to the location in which they learn. I'm a real big advocate for inclusive education. And so in this example, Franklin's in his general education classroom with his age-appropriate peers. That's the environment that the goal will be worked on. So that's what I want to put in the goal. And with supports that are available under typical circumstances. And in this case, there's going to be a verbal prompt provided by a teacher or peer and something that is readily available in that setting. The T in SMART goals is time bound. And as noted earlier, each goal should say when it will be achieved. So by the second marking period, there'll be an increased level of skill. And there might be a decreased level of skill in the previous marking period, or if the student didn't achieve the criteria for the first benchmark, you might keep the student there without adjusting it. If you want to take a deeper dive into this, you can check out this article that I wrote with 2 colleagues. And on pages 134 to 137, there's more in-depth information about how to write measurable and benchmarked IEP goals. And there's a hyperlink, and this will be provided to you along with this video. Here's a reference. It is free to download. And I want to thank the LRC for providing me with this opportunity to share this information with you.